It's such a pleasure to be joined today by my friends Jacob and Amy from Fort Wilson Riot. Welcome back to the city, friends.
Hi.
Hi, thank you, thank
Hey.
you.
Momentarily, we're going to dive into your newest song, which came out April 23rd. It's beautiful, very much a lockdown song. Before taking the plunge into that song, I'm just going to kind of draw together some themes that have come up in our previous three interviews. You were on episode 7 of Back to the City when it was at the Cyanide Radio Garage, and you debuted Never Met.
Oh yeah. Okay, well,
That was a long time ago.
yeah, feels like forever.
A theme that then re-emerged in all of our interviews since first showed its head just then. And that was the relationship between music and emotion. I think it was back in that first interview, Jacob, that you said that it was your policy, or like good policy in general, to let the emotion lead. And then in a later interview, I think when the three of us were discussing the Porno No No songwriting process, there was a reference to there being sometimes as many as 3 songwriters working together to figure out what the words should be for a kind of initially kind of nonsense melody, to see what word would fit, and specifically what word would fit with the emotion that's there present. Does that ring a bell? And is that a fair account of an aspect of the songwriting process?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely with Porno No No, that was kind of a lot of those initial songs that we wrote for that EP was that way. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think we can take a deeper dive into the relationship between emotions and music at various points in today's conversation. I think the songs invite that, especially the newer songs, I think, do really invite that. And I have on deck a Martha Nussbaum book, Upheavals of Thought, The Intelligence of Emotions. Why do I have a Martha Nussbaum book, Jacob?
Well, we had a little book club, didn't we? Of her. Is it still her most recent book? I don't know if she's put anything out since Anger and Forgiveness.
So Upheavals of Thought is a pretty old one. It was from 2001. So it's when she first introduces her philosophical position in this massive tome, just here, that the emotions are judgments of value. And I think this idea that the emotions are judgments of value is really key I agree with Nussbaum. She has a whole chapter on the emotions of music in that book. It's key for understanding how important music is for us. And I think also it's going to shed a lot of light on what these songs are doing for us and in general. Yeah, Nussbaum will make an appearance at some point. Are you familiar with Nussbaum, Amy?
Jacob likes to talk about the different books that he's read. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Not really, other than like probably the conversations we had while he was reading it.
Which was when we were doing our book club. Was when
Yeah.
I was talking about this.
Then we were reading Anger and Forgiveness, which is kind of an offshoot from this Upheavals of Thought strand of her thoughts. And
yeah, I'm ringing a bell a little bit about different conversations we had, because there is a thing about Jacob where it's like you are good at sharing the thoughts that you're having in the moment with and making them relevant to the conversation. And I think we talked a lot about that, anger and forgiveness. Now that we're saying it, yeah, we talked a lot about different people and like the importance of not having the anger and just forgiving. I think that was
she's even critical of the notion of
forgiving too. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, but we can dig into that a little bit more.
So in that book, Anger and Forgiveness, she has some concerns about how prominent and celebrated in our culture anger can be. But she isn't coming at that from a kind of anti-emotions perspective. She doesn't think that the emotions are unreasoning, kind of like the animal side of us. She's making a case that they are judgments of value, acknowledgements of our vulnerability, of our neediness, of the fact that we are social beings. She's informed by Aristotle, going back to Aristotle, the idea that we're social beings. And the emotions have intelligence, even anger. So even though she's skeptical about anger, anger is a judgment that something outside of us is a threat to our well-being or a threat to the well-being of somebody else. It's an intelligent judgment. So, and I think that core idea, when we turn to Nussbaumen a bit, via some details in your songs, I think it's that kind of befriending the emotions and acknowledging that the emotions have an intelligence is really going to help us today to think about what the music is doing. The second interview that we had came out 2 days after the election of the previous president. That was before the first birthday party, which you played, thank you very much, of Back to the City at Reverie. And then our third interview was at Nikki's house in the run-up to the city councillor release show. And Nikki was quizzing you with me about the political aspects of your songs. But then we had a really powerful conversation again about the personal and the political, the personal as political, and being social beings. I'm expecting a lot of those themes to come up again, courtesy of these new songs. And I'd like to begin by diving in. At the very end of Feels Like Forever, the vocals are honoring, celebrating music, and specifically live music, and the sense of community. So I kind of did that overview of some themes in the previous interviews to kind of prepare us for this moment, because those themes show up here in this moment in this song. So the vocals are, I want to sway with thousands to the same trite, perfect little pop tune. I want to sing out with a whole crowd to a chorus of anything loud. What thoughts do you have on the way in which that song is celebrating songs, live performance, the interpersonal interactions that are happening between band and crowd and between members of the crowd, and the human connection that's being facilitated by song and by the feeling component of the song? Any immediate reflections on that moment in that song?
Yeah, I mean, I think the part of, quarantine that really pulled the rug out of me more than anything was the loss of that congregational aspect of our lives that you kind of start to take for granted. I think the week before the quarantine was up in Detroit Lakes, I think, with the band Champagne Confetti, and was up there for like 3 days. And it was the perfect juxtaposition, but also like the perfect way to kind of have a last musical experience before quarantine, where it's like with this band of 11 people that are wonderful, lovely friends that we've grown to love, getting to play music for 3 days. And throughout the quarantine, like it was the whole thing has been very hard, like it was a year of really difficult, a lot of difficulty, just uncertainty with knowing what life was going to be like after, not knowing when that after was going to be. And I think in February is when I wrote this song. It kind of was one of those that came in a flood. During the coldest part of the year, it was like a week and a half or so of like below 30. I mean, it was maybe not below 30. It was cold enough that we couldn't go outside with our little toddler son.
Congratulations, by the way. This is our first interaction since.
Yeah. But it kind of coming into this year after the election and everything, and the signaling from the new administration that we will have vaccines and all this stuff, like kind of knowing that vaccines were coming, and so on one level, there's one phase of this that does feel like, okay, we're going into a summer where some of this will be behind us. But I was still thinking about these specific experiences of like being so crowded, the kind of experiences that sometimes, especially getting a bit older, like you're like, oh, I don't want to be like in the middle of some crowd of people and like, like where you can't move, you can barely move. And then just wondering, like, I don't know when people will feel, like, I don't know when that kind of gathering will happen again. It is hard to imagine that, and that kind of easygoing experience of people congregating in that way. And that's really kind of where that came from for me, and how healing that can be when you're sharing this moment with these people. One concert that I was kind of reflected back on when I was writing the song was when Neutral Milk Hotel, quite a few years ago now, did their reunion tour and performed all of In the Airplane Over the Sea. I just remember like being with friends that we never would have imagined that we would get to see this live, and we're just like singing. We all knew all the lyrics, and we're like singing to the whole album together, like as they're playing. And it's just, that is something that was really, being someone in the music world that where we went to a lot of shows, it's easy to take that for granted, and kind of the parts of it that you kind of complain about end up being the parts that you miss the most in a way.
I love that you honor that, the blessed oppressiveness of squeezing through a crowd. It's not sugar-coated. It's that exact experience, that thing that in this very nuanced, complex, deep human way, you didn't fully enjoy every aspect of it at the time. And that is still there. That's acknowledged here in this way, which I think is really adds to the power of the song. Something that I love about that particular moment in the song is how the music itself kind of recreates that atmosphere with this the squeezing through a crowd. Can you recall the rhythm and the synchrony of different instruments there? The musical line is kind of this pronunciation kind of to the musical line that really helps set that scene. Do you agree? And if so, could you kind of describe what's going on there and maybe how that came to be?
Like I said, the song came really quick, and it was kind of like, the lyric. It was the rare song, kind of like you were talking about before, where the music starts and then we put the lyrics to the emotion. It was one of those rare songs for me where the lyrics came first, and then the music kind of followed, or at least the lyric idea. But it all just like fit together immediately. Wanting it to start out feeling kind of isolated, like just guitar and vocals alone, and then letting the kind of like imagery of the memories of the things that are so dearly missed, that are, like you said, like include being surrounded by people and all this stuff. Like the arrangements should get more and more dense, and so,
dissonance.
that dissonance, like the horns kind of add this triumphant quality, but then also there's like some dissonance in the arrangement of the horns that these guys added, that I wasn't there for the horn session. Amy and our saxophone player Pete Lavoie added.
Amy, could you talk a little bit about that arrangement and that session? How you determined what the brass instruments were going to do?
Well, I mean, Jacob did really write part of he wrote the basic outline, because he spent more time with this song. I mean, it's really honestly not that much time compared to other songs that we've done, because quickly, and but it had an outline for Pete and I, and it was I hadn't really been in a room with anyone other than my mom some really close family members without a mask on. It just felt really good. I remember feeling really good. I had Pete be the leader, you know, getting the tempo right, because we didn't like listen to a click or anything like that. We just wanted to feel it, have it more of like a feeling and a breath type thing. And we really were working on not breathing at the same time, like trying to make it feel really full. But then at the end, we wanted to do an extra line. So we did the one Jacob wrote, and then we worked together at doing another take. And we played at the same time. So we didn't do like individual takes either. So we played together. So we had to do well together, which also puts a lot of pressure so you don't make mistakes, you know. But the second take that we did for the new parts, it was really fun because we just had to think of what note we wanted to play and see how it worked together. So we got to work together and feed off each other and try to be as dissonant as possible. Like, oh, that sounds really bad and good at the same time.
At what moment in the song does the dissonance come in, and what's the significance of that?
Kind of built into the chord progression. It kind of always drifts back to the, I'm not great with music theory, but I think it's the diminished seventh of the key that it's in. That chord keeps coming back, and that chord, you know, if you're playing a scale, it's the seventh note right before leading back to the home chord, and so kind of always hitting on that. The song kind of always rests on that chord, which is a dissonant chord to begin with, but also like a chord that is trying to lead you home. That kind of was there a little bit, but then having the other instruments come in and kind of accentuate that quality to it, and adding kind of like suspended melodies that kind of make you feel like you're always like, it's always kind of pushing you and you're striving to go to this place. I know Aaron Baum, our guitar player, also kind of put this like really simple electric guitar line that's this really like during the bridge part, that's this very, I think it's just the two notes pretty much repeated the whole time, that kind of add to that tension.
Aaron's doing so much. Not only playing guitar, but also organ and Rhodes and more than that.
With the spirit of what this song was kind of lamenting, I felt like I had to do this as in person with the bandmates that I was missing so much as possible. It's being safe at the same time. So Aaron, right, like shortly before the quarantine, maybe a year or so before the quarantine, he opened a new recording studio with some friends called Mid City Studios. They do incredible work there.
Yeah, did some Back to the City sessions together, actually.
Oh, cool.
Back to the City sessions in collaboration with Aaron, yeah.
Oh, that's great. I did not know that. That's awesome. I had been wanting to go there and do work with them. Aaron and I had become friends working at the Sound Gallery studio. And so I was really excited about this. And, you know, we had our son. And again, it was one of those things I took for granted. It's like, oh, this is one of my best friends. He's got a studio. I'll get there sometime. It'll be fine. And then the quarantine comes and it's like, makes everything so much more complicated. So I was just determined to use this song and the feeling of the need for healing to like, okay, in a safe way, let's go to the studio. The first session was just he and I and we did guitar and vocals, and then we did some piano and Rhodes and organ.
What is it about the timbre of those instruments that made them fit so well?
I think the only Rhodes playing on there is actually, it was an idea I had of having him play, like, again, he's a good player, so he can play these fast runs. And so I just asked him to like play some really rapid runs on the Rhodes, and then let's reverse it and put it in some like tasteful places. And so that's one of the effects that you hear, this kind of.
I think it's a really nice touch that the moment where we get the clearest kind of guitar solo is right at the end, after between feels like forever and it won't be forever. That seems to be the moment where, courtesy of that burst of electric guitar solo, it evokes a live show the most. In that moment, suddenly we're at the show in a way that works perfectly, I think. It's like the most generic moment, like generic rock moment. It's like Pointing the Way Home as well. And then we're home in a different way, with it being just back to the solo songwriter acoustic. So we have the kind of homely intimacy, but also the loneliness, which segs actually to something that you said on Nikki's sofa. You said the sad part of having consciousness is that we're always alone in it. You then immediately highlighted that biologically we are social creatures. So that's the other side of this. But your point, you kind of expanded a little bit and highlighted that there will always be a center of consciousness which is not accessible, which can't be known, perhaps even but to ourselves. Do you have any reflections on the fundamental loneliness, the existential predicament, and how it's being explored in a different way, of course, in the newer material?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just that kind of inherent isolation in our own subjective consciousness, kind of possibly the best medicine for that is the act of striving to connect, and you know, within the cultural framework we live in, we all find specific ways of doing that. And I think for all of us, music has been that thing.
And then it's taken away.
And then it's taken away. It was a very lonely time. I mean, in some ways, in other ways not. I mean, we actually had it was kind of a double-edged sword for us, because we got to spend so much quality time with our son. It was in a lot of ways incredible. It was a lot of ways like we couldn't ask for anything more, but we also weren't getting to spend that time. We also weren't getting to like be with our son, with our friends, and with our, you know.
Yeah, well, it was just that, you know, we got to spend all this time with Ornette and each other, and actually we got along just fine. It was great. Like, some people were like, I can't stand being around my whatever counterpart, but we had a great time in most ways. And other than like, we were getting to know Ornette so well, and then I wish I could have shared some of the cool things they were doing. I was doing so much online video stuff for work that I didn't really want to do a lot of screen time, and I didn't want a little baby to be watching the screen that much. So it just felt sad in that sense, like Ornette wasn't able to meet anyone or get to know people, and is the most social being. He's so social. He's not afraid of anything or any person.
Actually, a lot of the things that you've been saying, Amy, have been bringing up other themes that are in the song, and that I'm excited to explore further. So back when you were saying about the brass section, you were focusing on the breath, which is, I think, really, which I thought was beautiful, like how much awareness there was of the breath there. There are two references to breath in the song, waiting for the all clear to let loose that long held breath. And life has been distant, shallow breathing these days. So obviously those lyrics speak for themselves. In thinking about the creation of the song, you were thinking about the breath. The song has these two references to the breath in it. And it's not the only Fort Wilson Riot song to be very conscious of the body. I mean, it has the lyric body against body as well when we first get the scene of the show. Another one of the recent Fort Wilson Riot songs even has the word somatic in it. What does the word somatic mean? And what is the significance of these references to the breath and the body?
Well, the computer is resting on a dictionary of English usage. Maybe I should pull that up. That's kind of from Holographic World. Yeah. The way it's used in that song, I think, is a little bit more. That was kind of my sci-fi song about, you know, trying to question the values that we put on our bodies, in terms of sexualizing people, genderizing, if that's a word, people, and how we use that to determine value. I guess connecting it back to the other song too, that was I feel like something that I struggled with, having to give up the need to be close to other people physically, and because that song, yeah, maybe it's kind of suggesting some kind of sci-fi spiritual kind of idea that, like, we are more than our bodies. We can reach some kind of transcendence if we look beyond our you know, kind of basic physical frames.
But it seems like there's a working with the body that's happening throughout these songs. That's happening in the lyrics with the awareness of the breath, the celebration of the kind of embodied being at the show, the awareness of all of the bodies. And again, Amy, you were talking about the impact of music and adrenaline. You said you referred to adrenaline in the body. The word somatic made me think of like Peter Levine. I have my Peter Levine book here too, handily on my bookshelf. He has a lot of interesting things to say about how the same parts of the brain actually that relate to trauma relate to spiritual awakening. It's like the amygdala, for example. But for him, it wouldn't be through disowning the body, of course, but rather through working with it. And I feel that there is that. I feel like Fort Wilson Riot is friends with the body and friends with the emotions. As much as we might want to kind of experience kind of spiritual kind of transcendence here at this moment in this song, and as much as we might be aware that sometimes the messy emotions can, like anger or other emotions, might get us into predicaments. In general, I'd say that there's a friendliness towards the body and a friendliness towards emotion. Would you agree?
I think we should have that on a t-shirt. Fort Wilson Riot is friendly to the body and friendly to emotion.
And the song seems to be acknowledging how we can also end up getting lost in very abstract mental ideas about what our bodies mean. So, which is a whole extra layer. This might seg actually into our first little foray into Nussbaum, because something that comes up a lot in this book is the relationship between the emotions and the body.